Yeah, that's right. It's Tuesdays. That means it's Chris Michaels, and I am the aforementioned Chris Michaels. I will be doing a show for the next 30 minutes, regaling you with podcasting and live streaming and broadcasting brilliance and so on and so forth. I don't know about you, but maybe there's something out in the air. Maybe it's because there is some kind of astrological event occurring right now. The energy is off. But I, for one, am very ornery. I am not suffering fools lightly. And pretty much my attitude all day has been I'm not happy until you're not happy. And F everyone. I mean, it's just one of those awful times of year where you just don't care and you're tired of everyone else's BS and dodging questions, not answering questions that you ask. And then when you do finally pin down these people, they then come out and try to dodge accountability. I mean, it's just absolutely remarkable that the way things work in reality, right? And by the way, I had to change my background because for some reason my head, my enormous melon and my shoulders and everything else, I was I believe I was on a show last week or broadcasting or doing something last week, and I kept winking in and out of existence. So now I look like I'm on a racetrack, and everything behind me is going a million miles an hour. By the way, those are all photos that I've taken and I put onto canvas. So I am a also an amateur brilliant photographer as well. So if you ever wanted to see those sometime, let me know. I'll defog the background. I'll demystify what the photos are all about. So the New York Times today, they decided to do a hit piece on County Fair Blue Ribbon winner Susie Wiles. Now, I'm no fan of anybody associated with the Trump cabinet because guess what? What they're doing ain't MAGA. And we talk about this often. And it's painfully obvious that they don't really give a damn about Americans anymore. It's all about Israel and the Ukraine and so on and so forth. So the New York Times is now chiming in by saying Susie Wiles has decided to spill the tea on her experience after almost a year of being with Trump. She compared him to being an alcoholic, even though Mr. Trump does not drink. At best, he does a Diet Coke. And she is now having daddy issues. Yes, Miss Susie Wiles is having daddy issues by comparing Trump to her quote unquote absentee parent, Pat Summerall. And this is what we're dealing with. I mean, how stupid do you have to get, right? First off, if you're going to do a semi off the record interview, do you really want to portray to people that you've got daddy issues and you are comparing your boss to your father and you still have unresolved trauma from your childhood? This is not a very good look. So Wiles also said that she decided to forge a loose agreement with Donald Trump about the settling of political scores. And this is something that should have resolved itself within 90 days of Trump taking off. I mean, but this is what we want. We want political scores settled. We don't want the statute of limitations running out. We don't want people like Comey and Clinton and Obama running rampant free across the countryside, being able to get away with things like Russiagate and Ukrainegate, and Trump is Putin's puppet and he somehow dodged the Secret Service, the CIA, the FBI, and all the background checks. And somehow, during Trump's first presidency, he was still talking directly to Putin and taking orders from Putin. Yeah, nobody wants to hold those assholes accountable. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to swear. However, nobody wants to hold those people accountable. And then she decides, Miss Susie Wiles, to say that VP JD Vance, also Chris Michaels ain't too much of a fan of him, is a conspiracy theorist. What's wrong with that? Whenever you want to try to discredit somebody, you claim that they are a conspiracy theorist. Oh, yes, that's going to clear the air. Usually, when people call you a conspiracy theorist, it really means that you've got two brain cells to rub together and you're capable of critical thought. So, Miss Susie Wiles is upset that J.D. Vance is capable of thinking on his own and forming his very own opinions. So she continues along with this tirade by accurately, I'll give her this much, claiming that Attorney General Pam Blondie has completely whiffed, quote unquote, the handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Well, I mean, I guess you could claim that Susie Wiles is mistaken because there are no Jeffrey Epstein files, right? Remember, it's all gone away. There are no files. They were never on her desk. She was always lying to you. She never handed out binders full of the Jeffrey Epstein files to various social media influencers. That never happened either. So she's wrong about this. But Miss Susie Wiles is, in fact, correct about Miss Pam Blondie being a complete moron, not being able to quell the base and there are many questions about who was involved with Jeffrey Epstein and what was in the Epstein files. Never mind the Epstein address book and the little black book that he used to, have his messages taken into account with. There's something else going on here, right? So you've got to understand that the New York Times just doesn't post an article like this for no reason. There is some kind of agenda behind it. And I think what you're looking at is some way to homogenize the message ahead of the midterm elections. Because with the midterm elections, you're going to need to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Nobody deviates from the reservation, and everybody is in lockstep. So the problem that you're seeing here is that Miss Susie Wiles is a Republican from the Ronald Reagan era. She had roles in George H.W. Bush's VP campaign. And also, she was involved with none other than Ron DeSantis's 2018 gubernatorial campaign. Say that 3 times fast. And she's also contributed to other folks like Glenn Youngkin and managing Rick Scott's 2010 gubernatorial campaign. So, for what it's worth, the gal does have stereotypical Republican pedigree. Everybody wants this kind of work done, especially if you start to factor in that DeSantis really, for all intents and purposes, I don't trust him as far as I could throw him. And being that he was in the military, I don't think I would be able to throw him very far, if at all. More than likely, he would just merely hold his arm out, and somehow I would be flipped over his back and ended up face first in the gravel. But he says the things that the MAGA base wants to hear. He says the things that his constituents would like to hear. The problem is that you have to look at what he's actually doing. Specifically, when he was running for president, you had a whole bunch of Republicans trying to get rid of Donald Trump during the primary season, the last time Donald Trump ran for office. And what did they try to do? They tried to throw DeSantis in there. Remember, you had four-leaf clover CIA stooge Sean Hannity. For some reason, he held a debate between Governor Newsom of California and DeSantis of all people during the campaign. How on earth are you going to sit there and try to tell me this, right? That while President Trump is running for office, you're going to hold a debate between those two of all people? Makes no sense. Makes zero sense at all. I just don't get it. I don't understand. But here we are today, and we're still enduring this mess. So you have to understand that DeSantis doesn't have the base at heart, right? He's got other objectives in mind, and it has nothing to do with what we want in office, okay? Now, here's the other thing that I found that was fairly interesting. Why would they want to throw Susie Wiles out? They want somebody else in power. And you can genuinely see what's going on with the Trump administration. The message, once again, is being extremely homogenized, okay? And what do I mean by this? They want absolute control. They want complete, complete, and utter obedience to the pro-Israeli agenda. And that's what we're really looking at here. It's it's kind of crazy once you think about it. But this is the situation that we're in. Those are the people that are donating to Trump's campaign. So we saw earlier today on CBS Morning. Now, CBS Morning, you've got the head over there, Barry Weiss. Oh, yes, she's going to be a rock hard pillar of just all kinds of journalist integrity. And now here's why I'm stalling. You ready for this? It's because for some reason I can't share anything anymore. I don't know why I can't share any of the pages, so I'll have to read it to you. You have to use the theater of the mind. Okay, this is odd. I used to be able to share my screen, but once again I can't. Okay, so this is fun. What a time to be alive. Okay, pro-Israeli activist. This is from Chris Menahan from InfoLib News. Noah Tishby is calling for strong action against anti-Semitism on Barry Weiss's CBS. He said that one of the most powerful things, or she said at least, one of the most powerful things that anybody can do, any government, any organization, is adopt what's called the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. I believe this is one of the reasons why they want Susie Wiles kicked out, because she's not necessarily on board 100% and completely with the 100% and completely pro-Israeli agenda. So if you go over to the IHRA, which is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, I did a podcast on this, spoke with Greg about this. This was last year. You've got various people in Congress that are trying to adopt their very liberal definition of what anti-Semitism is all about and make it at least something to say this is what the federal government considers to be anti-Semitism, right? Whatever they may pass, it probably will not have any teeth in the workplace, but they're still going to try and push it through. And they're going to pull a COVID play where they say, well, we can't force businesses to do anything specifically, but at least we can put out the recommendations and then they can do as they wish. So just going through some of the top definitions of what anti-Semitism is, thanks to IHRA. You cannot accuse Jewish citizens of being more loyal to Israel or to the alleged priorities of Jews worldwide than to the interests of their own nations. What? Huh? It's anti-Semitic to apply double standards by requiring of it a behavior not expected or demanded of any other democratic nation. It's also anti-Semitic if you use the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, such as claiming that the Jewish people killed Jesus or blood libel to categorize Israel or Israelis. It's also anti-Semitic if you draw comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And you can also claim that you're anti-Semitic if you reference the New Testament. So this is what the Trump administration has now fallen to. Now, this is just all the way going to what? It's going to the midterm elections. A lot of people are really pissed off that Trump has been Israeli first and not America first, despite the fact that he was the one that was doing what? He was running on all of this, and he wanted to make sure that everybody understood that he was the America first president. But here we are, and we ain't looking at it. So now he's in kind of a little hot water. And once again, you also have to recognize that the definition of anti-Semitism and who could be considered an anti-Semite is loosey-goosey at best. I'm going to read you from the Jerusalem Post conference. We had the Stop Anti-Semitism founder. Now, I wish I had her name. Well, let's do it. That's why we do this live. Stop Anti-Semitism founder. What's this babe's name? So she was over there. Leora Rez. Yes, she is a quite the humdinger. So she was on the podium. She shook hands with everybody, and she's up there, and she's saying we need to stop everything. So she says this. Now, bear in mind, this is something that a Stop Anti-Semitism Jewish founder is saying. And also bear in mind the IHRA definition of what anti-Semitism is all about. Google, she says, and SEO will follow you for the rest of your life. When you look for a job, when you look for a spouse, when you look for a nanny, when you look for anything, our work will always be documented. When we act, lives change. And anti Semites learn sometimes for the very first time in their lives and history that targeting Jews will come at a price. Now, if a mere Goyim or Gentile were to say something like this, immediately you would be a Nazi sympathizing anti Semite not worthy of the air that you breathe. But since she's saying it, it's all fine. It's just one of those things. I mean, it's just so stupid. And the reason why I laugh is because you have no other choice than to laugh at these people. They are so hypocritical that you have to see it for what it actually is. An utter rhetorical nonsense. They can say whatever they want, but if you also say the same things that they say verbatim, then it's well, you're not part of the culture. Okay, just stupidity. So this all has to do with getting on board with the midterm elections, and unfortunately, Donald Trump is, I believe, in some hot water with that. Okay, so Zelensky. We've got this nonsense going over on in the Ukraine. And what are we doing this now? 2 years or something like that? The Ukraine is going to be the one that are going to beat back the Russians. They're the ones that are holding back Putin, because if it wasn't for the neo-Nazis in the Ukraine, then Putin would be driving all the way to Paris a la Hitler. And then before you know it, he would be on the shores of Dover ready to invade London. Yes, of course, that's exactly what Putin wants to do. This could be farther from the truth. It's not something at all that is planned with anybody. And for what it's worth, little Narco Rubio, warmonger at large within the Trump administration on behalf of Miriam Adelson, he has been kicked out of all kinds of negotiations because Donald Trump realizes the game that Narco Rubio is trying to play on behalf of his donors. Little Narco Rubio is not somebody that Trump would have preferred to be in the spot that he's in. And this all came at the behest of Miriam Adelson. She basically said, well, I want Narco Rubio in your administration in some capacity in a very, very significant way. And I gave you all of this cash, so you better do it or else. And Trump acquiesced and tucked his balls between his legs. And so now we've got to suffer this idiot, Marco Rubio. Trump realized that the game is being played against him. So now we've got Witkoff and sashaying Jared Kushner involved in all of these negotiations all across the world. And it's one of those interesting topics that now we have some kind of headway. It's almost as if Marco Rubio didn't want any kind of peace. I mean, who would have thunk? We're starting to hear rumors that Donald Trump's peace proposal is about 80 to 90% agreed upon between the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, except for this final 20%, which happens to be the most important part of the agreement, and that is Zelensky is going to have to start to consider to give up the land that was always Russian throughout history. And if anybody has anything to say about that, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Well, it was given to the Ukrainians, and there's no way it was Russian. Well, you can make the same argument for the Levant. Well, it was promised 3,000 years ago. So stop it. Nonsense. Absolute nonsense. So now as a way for leverage, we are suddenly seeing that the New York Times has reported the United States, Ukraine, and Europe have agreed on a NATO-like guarantee for the future security of the Ukraine, and two U.S. officials said that they tried to come up with a revised peace proposal that would deter future aggression and still satisfy Russia. Here's how you stop future aggression: stop committing war crimes, stop committing crimes against humanity. And I'm looking at you, Ukraine. Maybe we should also guarantee things like no more color revolutions on the borders of our supposed adversaries like China and Russia. The land issue is the big problem. Americans are trying to find a compromise, Zelensky said, between two toots of blow. They're proposing a free economic zone in the Donbass, and I want to stress once again, a free economic zone does not mean under the control of the Russian Federation. Well, the problem that Zelensky has with all of this is that he doesn't want to give up any land. And the buffer zones are going to be on Ukrainian territory. And it doesn't mean the territory that, oh, Putin decided to illegally invade and take over and he's, all the rest. No, no. The buffer zone is on Ukrainian territory because the Ukrainians are losing the war in a bigly fashion. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people do not want to admit this. So much so that the EU and the English, the real upstarts in this whole situation, they're now saying that all of the frozen Russian assets should be essentially stolen. And the proceeds from the stolen Russian assets, so we're talking about yachts, real estate, investments, all that stuff, those proceeds should go directly to the Ukrainian side to help fund purchases for weapons, to start rebuilding the territory. And then you've got people like Larry Fink over there, from what Larry Fink's over at BlackRock, right? Or Vanguard. I forget which one he's at. He's another stooge. So you've got all of this going on. Here's the strategy of the EU. The EU understands that the United States is the one pulling the strings. And so if that's the case, then what do you have to do? You have to make sure that you get warmongering Republicans in power, or you get rollover Democrats in power. And what do these people like to do? Well, they like to start wars all across the planet. And so if these people can somehow make it to the midterm elections, then we are in the free and clear. Once we hit those midterm elections, once we've gotten all of these warmongers into places of power in Congress, then guess what happens? We can finally get more weapons, more funding for the Ukrainians, and then we can just wait Donald Trump out. He'll be a lame duck president for the final 2 years, and then wouldn't you know it, the prophecies of NATO will come true, and then we must prepare for a war with Russia within 5 years. Why are they saying that? Because within 5 years, Donald Trump will not be president, and he will not be able to run for president again. So they're hoping against hope that they'll get a Hillary Clinton-style figure, a Gavin Newsom, maybe even a J.D. Vance, or God forbid, another Bush family member in a position of power in the executive office to kick off World War III. That's the whole game here, okay? But from Substack, Andrew Korybyko, good luck pronouncing that name. Korbybko. Good effing luck with that one. I don't know how to pronounce that. Korybko, maybe? I don't know. But he's now saying that there is an anti-corruption investigation, which we know about, and they're targeting Zelensky and his inner circles. Good. Because I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I'm sick and effing tired of people ripping me off and my hard-earned dollar. Now, we also have this going on. The anti-corruption investigation is somehow people are trying to throw out there is somehow being pushed by the Trump administration because they're sick and tired of this C-list coke-snorting comedian that likes to play instruments with his phallus, Zelensky, being in power. He hasn't had an election in any time in recent memory, and he's using the excuse that, well, we're at war, and if we're at war, we can't hold elections here. We must be able to persevere in these trying times. No, that's not how this works. If you're so confident in your abilities and your policies, you should have no problem running for office, nor should you have any problem in garnering the majority vote so that you can remain in the positions of power that you're in. So, what else do we see? Now, this comes from Hal Turner Radio. Bit of a third rail person, but that's okay. Zelensky's pal, Yermak's office was searched in this anti-corruption probe. And on December 11th, what did they find in Vladimir Zelensky's friend's office, Andrea Yermak? Well, they found $14 million in cash and data on bank transfers totaling to $2.6 billion being funneled off to offshore accounts in places all across the world. He had multiple passports, including passports for the UK, St. Kitts, and the Bahamas. If this guy, one of Zelensky's inner circles, is capable of funneling off $2.6 billion, then I'd love to know how many billions of dollars did Zelensky steal from the American taxpayer and the European Union? I'd love to know where Zelensky got the cash to buy a bank in France. I'd love to know how many more real estate deals was Zelensky involved in, either through a shell company or directly or semi-indirectly through a real estate firm. I'd love to know all of these things because this needs to stop. However, it's not going to stop because guess what happened in the Senate? Of course, we have to vote on Christmas gifts for the war industry. The National Defense Authorization Act passed with flying colors along the usual party, well, I wouldn't say it's party lines, but with the usual vigor of 76-20 voting to pass this nonsense. And my goodness, what a bill. $900 billion. And out of those $900 billion, $1 billion of those dollars are going over to the Ukraine. Well, if Donald Trump wanted to stop all of this, all he would do is stop the money from going over to the Ukraine. Then we wouldn't have to worry about anything. We wouldn't have to worry about corruption probes, nor would we have to worry about staring into an abyss and a potential third world war. This is not what anybody signed up with. This is not MAGA. This is not what anybody voted for. So once again, we're looking at a Trojan horse style presidency. And I think reality has hit Donald Trump. It just seems as though some kind of fire in Donald Trump that we saw during the first Trump administration isn't there any longer. And I wish it was. I want those scores settled. I do not want people like Susie Wiles and many other people in Trump's inner circles to be there any longer. I want accountability. I don't want transparency because transparency doesn't promise accountability. I want justice to be served, and I want Trump to do what he said he was going to do, and that is to make America great again. I'm Chris Michaels. This has been The Chris Michaels Show. If you want to follow me, you can go on Spotify, The Chris Michaels Show. On YouTube, I'm there, The Chris Michaels Show, except I am shadow banned into oblivion. So you've got to do your homework, especially on Spotify. Spotify pulled some fancy footwork with my posts last week. They were automatically putting my posts with a publication date of 1969. So what happens with that? It was a default 1969. So that means that all new shows would go to the bottom of my hefty list of podcasts and live streams. And also, none of those shows would show up on anybody's browsing preferences. So it almost worked, but I found a way around it. So I'm one of the most shadow banned people out there. Do find me, The Chris Michaels Show. I'm also doing reels now on Instagram. So you can find me over on Instagram too, The Chris Michaels Show over there. Not very good at it, but I'll get better. So as always, it's been a pleasure. I am Chris Michaels. This is The Chris Michaels Show. And as I say every single week, I will see you next Tuesday.